The bright lights of TNT's Inside the NBA studio cast their familiar glow across the polished hardwood set in downtown Atlanta. It was a typical Tuesday evening in March, with the NBA season heating up toward the playoffs. Stephen Curry sat comfortably in the guest chair, his championship rings catching the studio lights as he gestured animatedly, discussing the Warriors' recent winning streak with Charles Barkley, Kenny Smith, and Ernie Johnson. "You know, Steph," Charles leaned forward with that signature grin, "20 years ago, did you ever think you'd be sitting here with 4 championships under your belt?" Stephen laughed, adjusting his perfectly tailored Navy suit. "Honestly, Chuck, I was just hoping to make it to high school varsity back then. My dad always told me to stay humble and remember where you came from, no matter how far you go." The interview was scheduled to run another 15 minutes, covering topics from his recent triple-double streak to his thoughts on the upcoming All-Star game. But during a commercial break, something happened that would change the entire trajectory of the evening. Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart quietly along the studio's back corridor, the familiar squeak of its wheels barely audible over the distant hum of television production. At 42, Marcus had been working the night shift at Turner Broadcasting for 8 years, arriving after the last show wrapped and leaving before the morning crew started their prep. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle with the practiced efficiency of someone who took pride in honest work, even if it wasn't the work he'd once dreamed of doing. The hallway leading to the studio set was usually empty during tapings, but tonight Marcus needed to clean up a coffee spill that had been reported near the green room. As he rounded the corner, pushing his cart ahead of him, he stopped abruptly. Through the glass partition separating the corridor from the studio, he could see the set clearly, and there, not 30 feet away, sat a face he hadn't seen in over 25 years, but would recognize anywhere. Stephen Curry was leaning back in his chair, mid-laugh at something Kenny had said, his smile as bright and genuine as it had been when they were 12 years old, playing pickup games at the YMCA in Charlotte, North Carolina. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. His hand unconsciously went to his name tag, Marcus W. Facilities, and for a moment, he was transported back to a time when that same smile had been directed at him after every made shot, every stolen ball, every small victory they'd shared on countless basketball courts across Charlotte. They had been teammates on the Charlotte Hornets Youth League team, both skinny kids with big dreams and an unshakable belief that basketball was their ticket to something bigger. While Stephen had the advantage of his father Dell's NBA legacy, Marcus had raw talent and a work ethic that impressed. Even the older kids. Coaches had whispered about college scholarships for both of them. The future had seemed limitless. But life, as Marcus had learned, rarely follows the script written by 12-year-old dreams. A production assistant hurried past, snapping Marcus back to the present. He quickly moved his cart to the side, suddenly acutely aware of his uniform, the industrial blue shirt with Turner Broadcasting embroidered above his name, the keyring jangling from his belt, the smell of cleaning solution that seemed permanently embedded in his clothes. 30 seconds back from commercial, a voice called out from the studio floor. Marcus knew he should move along, finish his work, and slip back into the shadows where he belonged. But something rooted him to that spot, watching as Stephen straightened his tie and prepared to continue the interview. The distance between them, both physical and metaphorical, felt vast and insurmountable. As the red recording light blinked back on, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of retreating, he stepped closer to the glass, his reflection faint but visible in its surface. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was hope, or maybe it was just the pull of a friendship that had meant everything to him once upon a time. What he couldn't have known was that in just a few minutes, Stephen Curry's keen peripheral vision, honed by years of scanning basketball courts for the perfect pass, would catch sight of that reflection, and both their lives would be forever changed. "So, Steph, let's talk about your foundation work," Ernie Johnson was saying, his voice smooth and professional as the show returned from commercial. "You've been particularly focused on youth basketball programs in underserved communities. What drives that passion?" Stephen leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. It all goes back to understanding how fortunate I was, Ernie. I had incredible support. My family, great coaches, teammates who pushed me to be better. But I also remember playing with kids who had just as much talent, maybe more, who didn't get the same opportunities. As he spoke, Stephen's gaze briefly wandered beyond the cameras, a habit he'd developed over years of interviews to help himself think. That's when he saw it. A figure standing behind the glass partition, partially obscured by shadows but somehow familiar. His words slowed slightly. There was this one kid I played with growing up in Charlotte. Charles jumped in with a joke about Stephen's Charlotte days, but Stephen's attention was divided now. The man behind the glass had stepped slightly into the light, and Stephen could make out more details. The height was right, about 6'2". The build was broader now, filled out with age, but the posture was unmistakable. And that's why giving back is so important, Stephen concluded, though he couldn't remember exactly what question he'd just answered. We'll be right. Back with more from Stephen Curry, Ernie announced as they cut to another commercial break. The moment the red light went off, Stephen stood up abruptly. I'll be right back, he told the crew, ignoring the makeup artist trying to powder his forehead. He walked quickly toward the glass partition, his heart rate picking up with each step. Marcus saw him coming and panic set in. Every instinct told him to grab his cart and disappear, to preserve the dignity of their last memory together rather than confront the reality of where life had taken them. But his feet wouldn't move. Stephen reached the glass and looked directly at him. For a moment, neither moved. Then Stephen's face broke into a slow, incredulous smile. "Marcus Williams?" he said, his voice barely audible through the glass. Marcus nodded, managing a small wave with his free hand. Stephen immediately looked around for a way to get to the other side. He spotted a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," and didn't hesitate. A security guard started to intercede, but Stephen waved him off. "It's okay. I know him." The corridor suddenly felt smaller as the two men faced each other after more than 2 decades. Up close, Marcus could see the lines around Stephen's eyes, the slight threads of gray in his carefully styled hair. But the smile was exactly the same. "Man, I can't believe it's really you," Stephen said, extending his hand, which Marcus shook firmly. "Marcus Williams, number 23 on the Hornets. You had that wicked crossover that used to leave me in the dust during practice." Marcus let out a surprised laugh. "You remember that? Remember it? Dude, I stole that move. I've been using variations of your crossover my entire career." Stephen's expression grew more serious. "Man, what are the odds? What are you doing here?" Before Marcus could answer, a production assistant appeared. "Stephen, we need you back in 5 minutes." "Yeah, just give me a second," Stephen said, not taking his eyes off. "Marcus." The weight of the question hung between them. Marcus gestured to his uniform, his cart. "I work here, night shift facilities. Have for about 8 years now." If Stephen was surprised or disappointed, he didn't show it. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "Good, steady work. That's important, especially these days." "Yeah, it pays the bills," Marcus said, appreciating that Stephen didn't push for details about why a kid who'd once been recruited by 3 Division I schools was now mopping floors. "Listen," Stephen said, glancing back at the studio. "I have to finish this interview, but we need to catch up properly. Are you free after the show? Maybe grab some food?" Marcus shook his head. "I've got to finish my rounds. This building's huge, and I've still got 4 floors to cover before my shift ends at 6. "Stephen, really, we need you back now," the production assistant said more urgently. Stephen looked frustrated by the time constraint, but then his expression changed. "Actually, you know what? Stay right there. Don't go anywhere." "What do you mean?" But Stephen was already heading back toward the studio, calling over his shoulder. "Just trust me, okay? Like old times." Marcus watched through the glass as Stephen returned to his seat, the makeup artist quickly touching up his face. As the show prepared to come back from commercial, Stephen said something to Ernie Johnson that Marcus couldn't hear. Ernie's eyebrows raised, and he glanced toward the glass partition. The red light came back on, and Marcus found himself with a front-row seat to something he never could have imagined. "Welcome back to Inside the NBA," Ernie said to the camera. We're here with Stephen Curry, and Stephen, during the break you mentioned something pretty remarkable just happened. Stephen nodded, his usual media composure replaced by genuine emotion. Yeah, Ernie, sometimes life has these incredible moments that remind you of how connected we all are. I was just talking about youth basketball and giving back, and I literally just ran into someone from my past who embodies everything I was trying to say. Charles leaned forward, intrigued. What do you mean? There's a man working here tonight, someone I played basketball with when we were kids in Charlotte. We were teammates, and he was honestly one of the most talented players I knew growing up. Behind the glass, Marcus felt his knees go weak. Hold up, Charles Barkley interrupted, his voice carrying that mix of curiosity and disbelief that made him such compelling television. You're telling me there's somebody here right now who used to ball with you back in the day? Stephen nodded, his eyes bright with the kind of authentic excitement that couldn't be manufactured for television. His name is Marcus Williams, and he's working here tonight. Actually, Stephen turned toward the glass partition and gestured. Marcus, come here, man. The camera operators, sensing something special was happening, began repositioning their equipment. The director's voice could be heard faintly through the studio speakers. Camera 2, get ready to pick up whoever Stephen's talking to. Marcus stood frozen behind the glass, his cleaning cart suddenly feeling like an anchor. The last thing he wanted was to be on national television in his work uniform, but Stephen was persistent. Come on, don't be shy, Stephen called out, standing up from his chair. Ernie, is it okay if I bring him? Over here? Ernie Johnson, with the seasoned instincts of a broadcaster who recognized genuine emotion when he saw it, nodded immediately. Absolutely. This is what live television is all about. A production assistant opened the door to the corridor, and Stephen personally walked over to Marcus. Come on, brother. You're part of the story now. Steph, I can't. Look at me, Marcus whispered, gesturing to his uniform. I'm not dressed for this. Man, you think I care about that? You think anyone watching is going to care about that? Stephen's voice was firm but kind. You were one of the best teammates I ever had, and that includes everyone I've played with in the NBA. Come on. The sincerity in Stephen's voice broke down Marcus's resistance. He left his cart in the hallway and followed Stephen into the bright lights of the studio. The cameras captured every step as they walked together toward the interview area. Gentlemen, Ernie said as they approached, we have a very special guest joining us. This is Marcus Williams and Stephen. Why don't you tell us about your history together? Marcus stood slightly behind Stephen's chair, clearly uncomfortable but trying to maintain his composure. Up close, under the studio lights, the contrast between the two men was stark. Stephen in his expensive suit, Marcus in his work clothes. But there was something in their body language that spoke to a deeper connection. Marcus and I played on the same youth league team in Charlotte when we were about 12 years old, Stephen began, glancing back at his old friend with obvious affection. The Charlotte Hornets? Yeah, we thought we were pretty cool with that name. Kenny Smith laughed. Y'all probably thought you were going to be the next Hornets players for real. Actually, Stephen said, his tone becoming more serious, Marcus probably could have been. This dude was special. He had handles that would make some NBA guys jealous, and his basketball IQ was off the charts. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Stephen's being way too generous. No, I'm not, Stephen said firmly, turning to face him directly. Marcus, you remember that tournament in Greensboro? Summer before 8th grade? Marcus's face lit up with recognition. The one where you got sick right before the championship game? Food poisoning from some sketchy gas station hot dog, Stephen laughed. I was throwing up in the bathroom, and coach was about to forfeit because we only had 6 players. And you played anyway, Marcus said, the memory clearly vivid for both of them. I played, but you carried that team. 32 points, 11 assists, and we won by 20. Stephen looked at the camera. This man right here taught me what it means to step up when your team needs you. Charles, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. So Marcus, what happened? How'd you end up working here instead of playing professionally? The question that Marcus had been dreading hung in the air. The studio fell quiet, and he could feel the weight of the cameras on him. Stephen seemed to sense his discomfort and started to redirect the conversation, but Marcus held up a gentle hand. "Life happened," Marcus said simply. "My mom got sick when I was 16. Cancer. I had some college interest, but someone had to take care of her and my little sister. So I stayed home, worked whatever jobs I could find, and did what needed to be done." The honesty in his voice was palpable, and even Charles Barkley, never at a loss for words, sat quietly. "She beat it, though," Marcus continued, his voice stronger now. "Took 6 years, but she beat it. My sister graduated college, became a nurse. Everyone's doing good now." "And you've been here at Turner for 8 years," Ernie said, clearly moved by the story. "Best job I've ever had," Marcus said with genuine pride. "Good benefits, steady pay, and I get to see shows like this get made. It's honest work." Stephen had been listening, with obvious emotion, and when Marcus finished, he stood up and put his arm around his old friend's shoulders. "You know what, Marcus? You did something way more important than playing basketball. You took care of your family. You sacrificed your dreams for the people you loved most." Stephen's voice cracked slightly. "That makes you more of a champion than I'll ever be." The studio was completely silent for a moment, the kind of silence that occurs when something genuinely profound happens on live television. "But here's the thing," Stephen continued, and there was something in his tone that suggested this moment was about to take another unexpected turn. "I've been blessed beyond measure in my career, and I've never forgotten the teammates who helped me get here. Marcus, you deserve to be celebrated, not just for who you were as a player, but for who you are as a man." Marcus looked confused. "Stephen, how would you feel about coming to our next home game as my personal guest? You and your family. Courtside seats, pre-game warm-ups, the whole experience." The offer caught Marcus completely off guard. "Stephen, I can't accept that. That's too much." "It's not nearly enough," Stephen said firmly. "And actually, there's more." Ernie Johnson, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding, leaned forward in his chair. The experienced broadcaster had seen countless interviews over his decades in television, but there was something about this moment that felt different, more authentic, more human than the typical celebrity interactions that filled sports television. "Stephen," Ernie said carefully, "it sounds like you have something else in mind." Stephen nodded, his expression a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Actually, I do. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." Marcus, still clearly overwhelmed by the courtside seats offer, managed to nod. "Are you happy with your work here? I mean, really happy?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He glanced around the studio, suddenly very aware that this conversation was being broadcast live to millions of people. It's good work, Stephen. Like I said, it pays the bills and—" "That's not what I asked," Stephen interrupted gently. "I asked if you're happy." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, the kind of pause that creates powerful television. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm grateful for it, but, if I'm being honest, no, I'm not happy. I haven't been happy in a long time." The admission seemed to cost him something, and Stephen immediately stepped closer. "What would make you happy?" Stephen asked. "I don't know," Marcus said, and the vulnerability in his voice was heartbreaking. "I gave up thinking about that a long time ago." Charles Barkley, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "Marcus, if you could do anything at all, what would it be?" Marcus looked around the studio, taking in the cameras, the lights, the faces of these men who barely knew him but were treating him with such genuine care and interest. "Honestly, I always thought about coaching. Working with kids, helping them avoid some of the mistakes I made, or at least helping them navigate the tough choices better." Stephen's face lit up. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." "What do you mean?" Stephen pulled out his phone and quickly typed something, then looked back. "At Marcus. I just sent a text to our head of community outreach. The Warriors Foundation is always looking for people to run our youth programs, especially in underserved communities. People with real experience, who understand what these kids are going through." Marcus stared at him. "Stephen, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to offer you a job." full-time position with the Warriors Foundation, based in Oakland. You'd be working with kids aged 12 to 18, developing basketball skills, but more importantly, helping them with life skills, college prep, career planning. The whole package. The studio erupted. Kenny Smith started clapping. Charles was shaking his head with a huge grin, and Ernie was simply staring at Stephen with obvious admiration. Hold on, Marcus said, his voice shaking. Stephen, you can't just offer me a job on live television. You don't even know if I'm qualified, if I can do the work, if— Marcus, Stephen interrupted, I've known you for 30 years. I know exactly what kind of person you are. You sacrificed everything for your family. You've worked honestly and with dignity, even when life didn't turn out the way you planned. And most importantly, you understand what it means to face real challenges. Stephen turned to address the camera directly. These kids we work with, they don't need someone who's never struggled. They need someone who's been where they are, who's faced tough choices and made the right ones even when they were hard. Marcus was crying now, not bothering to hide it. I can't believe this is happening. Believe it, Stephen said, putting his arm around Marcus again. And here's the thing. This isn't charity. This is me being selfish. I want the best people working with these kids, and you're one of the best people I know. Ernie Johnson, his own voice thick with emotion, looked into the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, what we've just witnessed is something truly special. In an age where authentic human connection can seem rare, especially on television, we've seen something real unfold before our eyes. Charles nodded. This right here is what sports is really about. Not just the games, but the relationships, the way we lift each other up. Marcus, Kenny said, do you have anything you want to say? Marcus wiped his eyes and looked directly into the camera. I want to say thank you to Stephen, obviously, but I also want to say something to anyone watching who might be in a situation like mine. Sometimes you think your story is over, that the dreams you had as a kid are just that, dreams. But sometimes, if you keep doing the right thing, if you keep treating people well and working hard, life surprises you. He paused, gathering himself. And Stephen, I want you to know that 12-year-old kid who used to pass you the ball in Charlotte, he never imagined his teammate would grow up to be the kind of man who changes people's lives. But I'm not surprised. You were always special, not because of how you played basketball, but because of how you treated people. Stephen was emotional now too. We were a team then, and we're still a team now. As the show began to wrap up, Ernie made an announcement that surprised everyone. Before we go off the air tonight, I want to let our viewers know that Turner Broadcasting will be matching Stephen's foundation with a donation to youth basketball programs, and we'll be following Marcus's journey as he transitions into his new role. The camera captured one final shot of the two men embracing, and as the show went to commercial, viewers across the country were reaching for their phones to share what they'd just witnessed. In the weeks that followed, the clip would be viewed millions of times, with comments pouring in from people sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness, of dreams deferred but not destroyed, and of the power of genuine friendship to transcend time and circumstance. But for Marcus Williams, standing in that television studio with the friend who had just changed his life, none of that mattered yet. What mattered was the feeling he hadn't experienced in over 20 years. The feeling that his story was just beginning, not ending. 3 months later, Marcus would be running basketball clinics in Oakland, working with kids who reminded him of himself and Stephen at 12 years old. He discovered that he had a gift for reaching the quiet ones, the kids who felt like they didn't quite fit, and he'd learned that sometimes the most important victories happen off the court. But that night in Atlanta, as the studio lights dimmed and the cameras stopped rolling, all Marcus could think about was calling his mother and sister to tell them that sometimes, if you're very lucky, life gives you a second chance to chase the dreams you thought were gone forever. And sometimes that second chance comes in the form of an old friend who never forgot that you were teammates, not just in basketball, but in the game of life.